Hello, welcome back to another review from us here at But Why Though. I'm Jason. This is Swara,
Hello. Thanks for having me back on, y'all.
and we're stoked to be talking about the latest, the 14th edition in the long running Assassin's Creed franchise, Assassin's Creed Mirage. Just to get it out of the way, first of all, just in like a sentence, what are your feelings about the game?
Oh, I love it. I was telling you this before. I haven't progressed that far. I haven't had as much time in the last 2 weeks that I would have liked to have. But when this was first announced, I was amazed that we were finally getting, at least since the first Assassin's Creed, where there was an Arab assassin, but now another Arab assassin set in Baghdad at the height of the ninth century during the Abbasid Caliphate, with his Persian mentor assassin, who would be voiced by the legendary Shore Agdashlu. I was really amazed. I was so excited. Finally, like, this is Swana representation done right. Because so often I felt this especially during the game. We, so I y'all might know I co-host the Middle Geeks podcast. We discuss anything and everything in Swana, i.e. Mina Media. And there's been some gains in the last few years, but also like a lot of still Orientalist racist bullshit we've had to deal with in movies, like Indiana Jones and Wonder Woman 1984, in Dune. I could go on. And to see a major media franchise like Assassin's Creed finally do it right with Swana Arab and Swana creators in front of and behind the camera, and have actual consultants and create a this is like the best version of Baghdad I think ever in Western media, period, beyond just video games. It's I'm truly amazed. Like, to have something like this is it really feels like a blessing. I mean, the thing is, like, we are our peoples, I'm Kurdish, there are Arabs, Persians, Turks, Turkmens, Balochis, Armenians, Azeris, etc., Amazigh. Our peoples are so wide, so vast, so diverse, with so much history. We should have so many of these kinds of stories, like, for all of our various communities throughout history. But because of Orientalism, because of racism, because of all that through Western media, we just haven't. But have something like this, particularly again, of the Abbasid Caliphate at its height in Baghdad, and to see it so beautifully realized is just chef's kiss. It's amazing. I want more. Ubisoft, please give me more of this set in other Swana countries. Other video game franchises should take. No, I know, for example, that Prince of Persia is now, doing more to be culturally accurate. Also at Ubisoft, they're really putting in the work. They're setting the standard. And that was not a sentence. I know, or that was a very long run-on sentence, but like, this is amazing. I love it. And it's not a perfect game. As we were also discussing, it's relatively short, but I would have liked it to be longer. But for what it is, I love it. I'm so happy.
Right. That's the biggest thing to me is that it does all those things really amazingly, as you've described, and as I'm sure you will even more in a few moments, but it also is a good game. Like, that's really important. This is probably the cleanest, smoothest, most like on top of itself launch of an Assassin's Creed game on day one in a long time. Uh, Generally, just AAA games of late are all questionable and how they will perform at launch, and there's nothing that should keep anybody back from downloading this game right away to give it a go. My one sentence also is definitely, I think it's a great game, and it's specifically a great game for anybody who has ever enjoyed any version of Assassin's Creed before or who has never enjoyed one yet, because this is a shining example of a game that its producers listened to not just one section of its fans and its feedback over the last 15 plus years, but really to a wide swath of players of all kinds, and made choices accordingly about how to create the next iteration and probably next several iterations of the franchise going forward. I and someone who fully recognizes that there's a big difference between many of the different titles over the years, and that there's different eras of its gameplay, of its storytelling, of its presentation, etc. But I've always enjoyed all of them. It's something that I find myself in the minority about most of the time, but I come into this game with the expectation of like knowing that Ubisoft has marketed this game as a return to the original form with current modern sensibilities to it, and with that expectation in mind, the expectation was fulfilled 100%. It is exactly that. It is original Assassin's Creed formula with a heavy emphasis on stealth and the assassinations of it all, with a de-emphasization on the combat that really, and like open world exploration and some of the light RPG elements that had really expanded in the games, beginning with Origin especially. And look, I loved those games. Odyssey might be my favorite. I love Valhalla. I've put hundreds and hundreds of hours into both of them and all of their DLC. But um, when it comes to what Ubisoft's explicit intention was for Mirage, it did it. It, which is truly miraculous. Like that doesn't happen often in
Right.
gaming, in any kind of entertainment, where they like tell you this is what we're doing and it meets everyone's expectations perfectly, and that's a good thing. Like it's kind of a miracle. But
Yeah. I think
separating,
what's
yeah, go for
sorry
it.
to interrupt, but I think like what's also interesting is like the variance of, not just gameplay between the games, but also within the games themselves, what they do best at, whether that's the combat. I understand that with Mirage, there's a return to stealth, which wasn't really in the previous games before it. But also, and I think this I'm speaking from my own experience with Assassin's Creed as a franchise. Always loved, the being in the historical setting and going through the motions with the character you're playing, and not as much the wider, revelations about the world. I thought they were really cool, like at the end of Assassin's Creed 2. But again, for me with Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, the way they were going about it just got increasing, and I Wikipedia'd it,
Right.
and it's just gotten more and more
Mirage is
convoluted.
Mirage is basically the only game that has no modern world part whatsoever out of
Right.
every game the game's
Right.
franchise has ever
Oh
had.
wow.
It also keeps the first civilization Isu ancient stuff to a minimum, at least comparatively to other games, where like it's there. And if you are someone that likes that, like I am, it's something that you could explore and look for, but it's not like an overwhelming part of the game for 95% of it, without touching on spoilers and such. That like if you don't care about that stuff or you don't notice that part of it, it doesn't, not that I would know because I am someone who notices it, but I don't imagine that it really impacts your experience of the game compared to pretty much every other iteration since the beginning, which is also interesting and probably a result of a decade plus of feedback about how people don't prefer the
Yes.
modern stuff, where I always have, but I know again I'm probably the minority about that.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jason. Don't mean to bash like your group with that.
That's
Um,
okay. It's
no,
still
but
there in this
no,
game, and so it satisfies me
yeah,
nonetheless.
there you go. There you go. Um, yeah, I just think when you have I know this with so many franchises, when you have so many sequels and spin-offs, and when they try to make a united narrative, i.e. the MCU, i.e. as we were discussing the other day in the Discord, kind of Star Wars right now, like it's a whole galaxy. Why is it just this one family and their associates? Um, it tends to like get things get tend to get a little lost. And I'm not saying Assassin's Creed was ever at that level, but I could definitely see how players might have felt that trying to connect all of these dots did become a bit cumbersome, and it felt like you weren't really going anywhere. But having standalone entries that just tell a good story on their own, this is what I want more of.
Exactly. I mean, and look, the franchise has done a soft reboot of its modern day and Isu stuff several times over the years, sometimes to better effect than others. But well, yeah, like what you said, what makes the story in this game work so well is that regardless of any of the connection that it does or doesn't make to other games or to the the first civilization stuff, etc. Like it tells a really compact and strong story within itself from beginning to end. You're starting off with one character and the people around him and the world he lives in, and you are following his journey for 10 years or so in his one life and city he lives in and around. And like most Assassin's Creed games have not done that in a long time either, where especially like Valhalla is a game that takes place across an entire continent, the entirety of England. And this game takes place in one city and its surrounding region. Like it's a big difference in the ability to tell a concise and easy to follow story with only so many characters, and it's to its benefit as a whole. Like it's not to say that I think that the other types of storytelling are not good in Assassin's Creed games, but it it does it very well here. Or well, I was gonna say, are there any things in your experience with it so far that you would like to have seen done differently or better, or just to even nitpick about?
Well, actually, sort of want to go the opposite first and say some more
Sure.
specific things that I do love about this game. First off, Baghdad, so beautiful, so detailed with all the buildings. I love that you can turn a random corner and see this beautiful, colorful carpet hung up. You see like people of all skin tones. Like you see people, the majority of people, would be browner skin, but some are lighter skinned, some are darker skinned. You see people from East Africa, from East Asia. Like Baghdad was a genuinely very diverse city. To see that on full display while still being still distinctly Arab and like NPC speaking Arabic in the background. I would really love to play this game again in Arabic with English subtitles. I think that would be a wonderfully immersive experience.
Yeah, I thought about it
To
too.
Yeah, to, like, get all those nuggets of history, to see oh my god, the House of Wisdom, like, this fabled library that was destroyed during the Mongol invasion a few, centuries later, and just see it so beautifully realized and colorful, the blue, like, dome and the books and the garden and the waterways, it's amazing. It's just such reverence and care was taken into portraying this Arab civilization at its peak as like a place of learning, as like a place you would want to go to, and not in some like Orientalist flatline we've often gotten, or like calling it a fantastical place, rather like grounding it in the culture, teaching players about, for example, the Banu Musa brothers, who were these geniuses, talking about other historical figures, talking about, the Grand Mosque and like there's this one grave site that's the site of, I believe, one of the relatives of the prophet, and you just learn so much history. I've never seen this in gaming before. Like you should expect it from an Assassin's Creed installment to learn about all this history, but like they outdid themselves here really, and
Right. I
I may
mean,
just be amazed because we never see it anyway, you know.
I think I've learned more about real life history from Assassin's Creed than anything else in my life practically, as someone
Yeah.
who has played the heck out of all of them and like then spends hours going through the internet and reading more about the things that I'm experiencing in the time that the games take place in. They've always been excellent at being really like thoroughly researched and very accurate to the real world that they're showing us in the games. Yeah, the thing you mentioned too, I've been saying since the first time I got to preview the game, this is the most truly like representative of metropolitan urban life and existence that any game period, but especially any Assassin's Creed game has shown before. It's touched on it a little bit in the past, where like in Valhalla you would see people from all over the world throughout England, but like only in special circumstances where you met that one character who was from Africa or from Constantinople or whatever it may have been. And here you can't turn a corner without seeing evidence of the Silk Road, evidence of just the languages and cultures and religions that inhabited this city in this
Yeah.
region during the ninth century. And it's just so much more realistic in that way. it's so much more immersive and so much more full because of it. It's definitely one of my favorite little like the example I give in my review is how I turned a corner at one point and there's a whole huge spillover of mangoes on the floor, and I'm like,
Yeah,
mangoes are not indigenous to Baghdad. That you know that some
exactly.
trader had to come with those mangoes from somewhere further east to bring them there and trade them, and
Mhm.
that's just like even in all the games where there were cities full of trading in it, like I never noticed it in the same way and in the same level of depth and color and just being everywhere, not just assigned to the one little corner of the city. Um, and yeah, I mean the way that this game is concise and full of codex entries to find at every corner really does make it more succinctly capable of displaying its history and culture and just sharing of knowledge than like the recent games where it's all there, but you have to pause a lot to go find it, or you have to do the whole separate discovery tour, which are all great things and you should do all of those, but it's just like it's right in your face here and it's awesome.
Yeah, and to speak more to that diversity, like you said, it's a Silk Road. It's primarily a Muslim city. You hear the call to prayer. You hear it like several times throughout the day. That's amazing for
Oh
me to hear
yeah,
as a Muslim. You'll
I
you
love
also
that.
see you also see Christian NPCs like walk around. Something I was hoping to see, but I'm not sure. We talked about it briefly. I didn't see as much Jewish representation in the background because there were Jews in Baghdad at the time, weren't there? Or I don't
Absolutely.
know,
It was
like,
a
yeah,
in my research and my previous studies on that time period, there were absolutely Jews that lived in this in Baghdad and lived in the whole area for 1,000 years at that point.
I'm trying to think what else I don't like about the game. Anything I can say. Uh yeah, I think I just wish it was longer. Like I'm already midway through it. I'm like already, but that is what it is. But I I think like if your main complaint is like I wish I had more of it, then that's
Right.
the highest compliment of a complaint.
Exactly. I wish it was longer because I wish it was longer because I like it so much. I'm glad that it's not though, because it's probably exactly how long it should be for what it is doing. And I will be honest that there were some points, especially in the middle of the game, where it starts to open up into a little bit more of a pick, choose your own adventure for a while. That stuff did start feeling a little repetitive. I was like, I don't really want to do the exact same thing for the fifth time in a row now, and started trying to just like blow through certain parts. But then as soon as that section ended and you went into a new part of the game, there was suddenly new stuff all over again and I was feeling pretty fresh. So it was a brief period of that. But my like deeper nitpicks about the mechanics are, I'll start with the parkour. I agree that it does feel just slightly clunky. Like it's vastly different from the most recent games where you could literally just free climb anything at any point. This returns to the like original formula where the only way you can climb was if there were things to climb on, footholds and certain paths. And so in that regard, I like that return to that style where you had to like think of every piece of parkour as almost a puzzle and how do I actually climb this tower? It's definitely not as intricate as some of the original games where they're like truly we're making puzzles of it. But the game does take its time to make puzzles of other things that it really hasn't before, like some of the like pushing and pulling the boxes and to make steps for yourself to take a jar of whatever those jars that explode are full of and like carry it across the map in a way that they've never really seen done before in these games. And so there's a little push and pull on that. A big thing to me though that I talked about in my review is how in the quest to make this game more stealth forward, I think that it did overall a good job, but kind of neglected a little bit of what is necessary in the combat side of things to make it feel balanced. Being caught by the guards basically means your time doing stealth is over and you are forced into a an open combat zone where you have two options. You either fight your way out or you run away and try to reset things. I often did both because sometimes I didn't feel like fighting a whole horde of enemies. There really aren't very many enemy types, and once you gain a lot of your tools or learn the different little tricks, you can dispatch them way too easily, or they become really overwhelming because there's too many of them. And the overwhelming is probably on purpose, but which means running away is good. But then you run away, and it's like there's something weird about the like the are they still watching me system where I can never tell like why am I not getting
Yeah.
out of combat now sometimes to like have things reset or just like again the nitpick of there's a dead person right next to this guard and this guard is not on alert. Why? Like, why haven't we resolved that one at this point? But at the same time, it's like there's a really
Mhm.
strong notoriety system for the first time in a long time where if you are notorious, the first random citizen that sees you will go and run and get the guards and you'll be in trouble. And so like
Mhm.
there's again it's give and take. So these are definitely nitpicks and they're not things that made me enjoy the game any less, but they're things that I hope now that the franchise has moved in this direction and they're getting huge
Mhm.
positive feedback that some of these specifics can be addressed going forward. Because again, like my favorite combat in the franchise was in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. It had the same
Mhm.
kind of parry and dodge system as we've seen for a while, actually, really since the beginning. But this version we see in Mirage is a descendant really of that system that started in um, Origins and then was I think perfected in Odyssey. And my just like small version of a complaint about it is just simply that again the types of enemies are pretty narrow and so it doesn't feel fun after a while to like do the parrying and dodging and deflecting. I'd rather just throw a smoke bomb and then assassinate them all and move on. And the options for upgrading your weapons and armor, like there used to be huge differences in the different upgrades and armor in the last couple games, and here it's like 80% aesthetic and 20% one single difference in perk. That doesn't really feel like it makes a difference in the gameplay ultimately. um I'm glad they're there, but I would like to see a return at least a little bit to like where finding new armor and new weapons actually makes a difference in like how quickly I can dispatch enemies or how long I can survive against larger hordes of more difficult ones because it kind of felt like it made one shift in the middle and then was stagnant the rest of the game. And even the original games had armor upgrades and weapon upgrades you had to purchase to fare better in more difficult parts of the game. So I hope that we'll see a little bit of a adjustment to that in the future. But again, they're kind of really nitpicks. Because overall, those systems all work pretty darn well and certainly way better than some of them have worked in the recent or even distant past.
Yeah. I haven't played it as much as I would have liked with the weaponry and like those systems to fully grasp it, but I definitely believe you. I mean, it just I like I like the variety. I will say, maybe something like Breath of the Wild slash Tears of the Kingdom has like spoiled us in that regard with weapon variety and stuff. Um, but yeah, no, I definitely hear you. I definitely hear you on that.
Yeah, but even as far back as like Assassin's Creed 2, probably I think
Mm,
is where it
yeah,
started. Like
100%. Yeah.
if you killed an enemy with a different kind of weapon, you could pick it up off the ground and use it, and it like it was a different kind of gameplay all of a sudden. You were using a hammer or you were using a dagger. Where again, like this is a streamlined version of Assassin's Creed on purpose, where they kind of really just stripped away a lot of stuff to make it smoother and smaller. And I'm sure that from here now we'll start building back in some of those types of pieces as the franchise continues on for another 15 years, I'm sure. So we've both done a lot of writing about the game on but why though, what are some of the other pieces that you can point folks towards for more of our thoughts and experiences with the game?
Yeah, so I had the distinct honor. I feel almost bad because like I nabbed this like opportunity from you, Jason. But you see, I said almost.
Nah, it's all you.
um, yeah, I had. a dream come true to speak with the Iranian American icon that is Shora Agdashlu about the game, asking her about how she related to her character of Roshan, this amazing Persian master assassin, and relating to her sense of justice for the real world, just particularly what's going on in Iran right now with Zinjian Azadi, or Zan Zandagi Azadi in Farsi. And it was just, it was a dream come true. Like you can either, excuse me, you can either read that interview on But Why Though. You can also listen to the podcast version of it. And I also had the honor of interviewing this game star, Lee Majdoub, about playing Basim. And I also talked to with him to the game's narrative director, Sarah Beaulieu, whom I have to say did the work. Sarah and the whole team at Ubisoft, they did so much work. And I'll just say again, like when it comes to representation, like showing these stories, Sarah did it so well, not being not part of that community, but involving us in the creation of it so well, and creating something magnificent with Mirage. And I'm just like, bravo, bravo. It was so great to talk with them, also in written form and podcast form. And I wrote, while Jason did the main overall review of the game, I got to sort of review it from a cultural perspective of how well it portrays Baghdad, Iraq, and in general, like the Swana region, again, in gaming where, like anyone who's Arab or brown is typically portrayed as just terrorists and like something like Call of Duty. But here our peoples are the heroes. We are like, in a fully like dynamic, complex society. And I wrote all about that. And yeah, y'all can check those out on But Why Though.
And you should. They're great interviews. It's the other article's great. Uh, for my part, like we both said, I wrote up our full review on the site for the game, as well as put together a couple of like explainer pieces. We've got a Who is Basim to help you understand his connection to his appearances in Valhalla, as well as in this game. We have a When does this game take place, so that you can pinpoint where in the timeline of real life, as well as the timeline of games, this one takes place, since there are many and they do not all happen in chronological order. And we also put out a full and complete timeline of Assassin's Creed over on the website. It goes all the way from the Isu and the first civilization to the modern day story, and every single game in between, and every detail you ever didn't realize you needed to know. Please read it. I spent so much time working on it, and it's really cool. There's also thousands and thousands of words about Assassin's Creed from articles over the last several other years, all from the times of Valhalla, from reviews of the game and its many DLC, to I did a ranking of all of the pieces of Eden in the series, from like most to least oppressive tools of tyranny and terror, basically, that I think is a pretty cool, fun little bit, if you're like someone who likes those parts of the game. Yeah, and a bunch of other pieces that you can find on the site about the franchise. There's a whole piece about what makes an Assassin's Creed game, because I detest that argument and think that everyone's wrong except for me, that all of them are Assassin's Creed games, and we should just stop fighting about it. But yeah, that's all I got. Peace out, y'all.
Take care, everyone.